you get a lot
Oh
of the
yeah,
gold bug, whoever, right? And
yeah.
saying, oh, you can't do it. We've tried it.
Lots of people, I don't know why, but a lot of Gen Xers who are prominent speakers
Yes.
talk about this, and I feel responsibility because I'm a Gen Xer. I'm right in the middle of Gen X, and so they're smart people. I listen to these people regularly. They have great macro takes. They understand the world, but they get stuck on certain issues with Bitcoin, and
Mhm.
so they still can't quite cross the Rubicon and come over yet. Just so interesting to me. So I think that what they're missing is
We have found another playable character, sports fans. Dr. Jeff Ross has graced us today, formerly Dr. Bear, now Dr. Bull Crab, I believe, if I'm correct. The founder and CEO of Vailshire Capital Management, LLC, is a registered investment advisor. Vailshire Partners, limited partners hedge fund, has an MBA, and also somehow, again, is a physician. I don't know how you do it. Doc, how are you?
Hey, Brandon, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I would joke with everybody that the show is playable characters. In you more than most people can see being in this space now for years. There's not a lot of there's a sea of non-playable characters, and there's not a lot of critical thinking going on in the world. So we're trying to find the ones that are playable. For those of you out there wondering why we do what we do and why we call it that. So again, I appreciate you being on here. I want to jump right into some of the things, like even the thing you tweeted out. I've got numerous things, but you tweeted out even today earlier, don't lose sight of the bigger picture. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And we've gone really to this next phase, which you have here, which is collectible kind of novelty, and then store of value number 2, 3, medium exchange, 4, unit of account. Could you kind of go into this and kind of your thought pattern? Because this is a theme of kind of how you are, your personality, how you've talked forever, just to kind of be the calm presence in the room. Walk me through these kind of stages here in the viewer, so you can kind of we can get the lay of the land here.
Sure. So there's a lot of talk about what Bitcoin is and what it isn't. And Bitcoin is a pretty complex topic, but it's also pretty simple as well. And so you see people getting kind of worked up, and you see mainstream take false narratives and really run with them. So I sort of like to be, I'm old now. I can claim the old card. I'm 49, pushing 50, and I've been around the block a few times. Like you said, I'm a doctor, and I'm, run a hedge fund, and so I've experienced a few things in my life. So, anyways, Bitcoin is awesome, and it's so fun to be a part of it at its inception. To me, it's about the equivalent of two different things. It's like the inception of the internet, and watching that progress and watching everybody make fun of it initially, and and say it's just used by criminals, and has no real use case other than electronic mail, and what the heck is that? Like, I was in college when email came out, and I was like, what the heck is this? Like, but it was kind of cool, and that's about all I saw. And so watching normies in mainstream not understand what Bitcoin is or where it's going, to me, is just super humorous. And it can be frustrating at times, right? And Brandon, I know you're a great teacher in this space as well. And so we spend a lot of time just kind of helping normies figure out what's going on and why we think it's such a big deal. The other thing that I think it's like being a part of it, and this sounds excessive, but I believe it. I think it's like being like the founding fathers hanging out at coffee shops before the American Revolution started, and kind of laying the groundwork for a new America. That's what I think this is. Like, that's how significant I think this is I think this is a world changing technology, and we get to be a part of this paradigm shift. And so I try to remember that too. Like, I spend my time teaching people, and a lot of people ask like why I'm so into this. Like, I'm a Christian, like I got lots of other stuff, I got lots of things on my plate. Why do I spend so much time talking about this stupid thing, all the time? It's because I think we are literally at the precipice of a new world. It's a paradigm shift. And so to me, this is extremely important. And it's extremely important to help people understand what's going on. And ideally, they can get in at the ground level and help to build this and help to build this better world. I like the way Michael Saylor talks about engineering a better tomorrow. A lot of engineers think like that. Like, let's be optimistic and let's think about where the world can go and all the implications. And so it requires people to spend a little time thinking about this. um, and so anyways, so that's why I have the views that I have and why I talk about Bitcoin so much. Getting back to your question about my tweet, I brought it up because Michael Saylor brought it up yesterday. He was on an interview on CNBC with Andrew Ross Sorkin, and they're, who's definitely a Bitcoin skeptic. And Saylor does an awesome job at remaining winsome and optimistic and not being confrontational. I love that about him, and I have a lot to learn. My other kind of hero in that way is Jeff Booth. They both just have this relentless optimism. They don't get dragged down. I can get dragged down and go start fighting the normies, and that's just not very productive, right? It just turns into a screaming match and people calling each other stupid and things like that. So what I like about him is just his way of thinking about things and helping people think about Bitcoin not as a trade or as a speculative asset, but as a long-term savings vehicle. So his push yesterday was quit thinking of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, as a cryptocurrency, as basically it continues to get labeled as. Think of it as a store of value. And I say this all the time, and Brandon, we've talked about this forever. The biggest problem the world faces today is the store of value problem. Why? Because government fiat currencies literally exist to steal the purchasing power of their citizens. So the reason we've seen the largest centralized nation states, the most powerful nation states in the history of the world over the last 50 years or so is I think completely because of fiat currencies that are controlled by the government. Why does that matter? Because they basically control inflation. They control the rate of debasement of their citizens, meaning they're stealing the purchasing power of their citizens over time. They're collecting all those benefits that we should be seeing as humanity, as citizens. We should be seeing this benefit of ever decreasing prices, because as humanity and technology progress, we should see those benefits, and that should be reflected in lower prices and a higher quality of life. That's not happening. Why? Because the government methodically, and I'm not even like a government conspiracy guy, I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, I just don't care usually about most government stuff, but they literally, because of the design of fiat currency, are stealing our purchasing power, and they have been for many, many decades. They get ever bigger, ever stronger, ever more powerful, while we get the shaft, right? We're on these hamster wheels, working our butts off forever and ever, dreaming of some retirement someday, which most people will never experience because life is getting more and more expensive. So that's why I make such a big deal about Bitcoin. Where are we right now? There are 4 phases basically for a society to accept a new form of money. And they go, all forms of money. And Saifedean Ammous does a great job on this, and other authors have talked about this, like in their history of money books. But it generally goes through 4 phases. A form of money starts as a collectible, then it turns into a store of value, then it becomes a medium of exchange, widely accepted, and then it becomes a unit of account for, like, on a personal, business, and nation state level. I think this is what Michael Saylor is alluding to, people are pushing the Bitcoin narrative too far, too fast. They're kind of talking about it. Oh, what an amazing medium of exchange it is. Lightning is everywhere. It's awesome. And I would push back on that. And I have, just being realistic, right? I'm a fanatical Bitcoiner, but it is not a ubiquitous medium of exchange. It still has a lot of kinks to work out. It's getting there, and it's being developed. And from talking to people like Jeff Booth and Lynn Alden and Preston Pish, and they're part of Ego Death Capital and other venture capital type people, that is all being built out right now. And so we will see that medium of exchange component be built out. But right now we are firmly in step 2, and that's the store of value phase. And what's fun for me, and it's probably because I come from Wall Street initially. That's where I came to Bitcoin way back in 2015. Because Wall Street is officially embracing it as a store of value. Larry Fink gets on CNBC and Bloomberg TV all the time and talks about it as being a store of value. He says it's it should protect, or it may protect against government debasement. And so consider Bitcoin as basically the store of value that you've always needed and always wanted. And then my final thing, and I'm sorry, I'm just going on a huge tangent. We can take it in different directions. But why I call the store of value the biggest problem humanity faces, we've seen this being reflected in the valuations across the board of different asset classes. So as a hedge fund manager, I'm always looking across different asset classes and looking for where there is value, potential investments, things like that, things that are overvalued and things to avoid. the store of value problem has found its way into, and when I say the store of value problem, I'm talking about the monetary debasement problem that all humans face. Their goal, all of our goals from a financial standpoint, is to work and to preserve our purchasing power and hopefully grow our purchasing power over time, so we can actually pay the bills for ourselves and our spouses and our kids and our grandkids and things like that. Like, that's what we're all in general striving for. And fiat government currency takes away that from us. It takes away our desire. It doesn't take our desire. It takes away our ability to do that effectively. And so that store of value premium, the monetary premium, has been placed across multiple asset classes. So we see these large premiums on stocks, real estate, this real estate bubble where things have been getting wildly overvalued, and people are using houses as speculations as ways to preserve and grow their purchasing power. That's crazy if you really take a step back. I think we're going to look back 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now and look back and be like, can you believe people used to like trade houses? Like, they would buy them and sell them for a profit. Like, that's crazy, right? Like, what people really need is shelter, affordable shelter. And the millennial and Gen Z cohorts have basically been priced out of the housing market, and that's actually a tragedy. That has huge consequences on society. And so that's just one of the ways that this whole store of value problem has found its way into other asset classes. You also see it in private equity. We saw it in bonds actually as well. So anyways, that was a really long answer to your original question, but we can take it whatever direction you'd like to.
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist, available now.
No, you made me think of so many good things. The one thing I see, and you kind of mentioned this too, which is it's really hard, and it goes through these 4 points. I feel like, and it's generally the normie, I think Bitcoiners are better with it, but it's being able to live in both worlds. I feel like that confuses so many people. And it's like, well, it's not, I mean, how many times can I buy a gallon of gas with it? Can I go, I mean, it's like living in these two worlds is very hard to educate people on. You kind of just have to get it yourself. No one can you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get him to drink it. And the person has to do the study and kind of get across that hurdle, that mental hurdle. The other thing I was thinking of too is deflation. You mentioned this. Obviously, Jeff Booth talks about this all the time as well. You mentioned, but to me, it's such a paradigm shift, and we've all known inflation our entire lives, and everyone, I mean, pretty much anyone alive has only lived in an inflationary world. I think that's probably true at this point. 110 years, 111 years, the Federal Reserve. So you have this world where no one knows anything different. It's like, does a fish know he's wet if he's been in the water his entire life? Like it just is. And everyone I see, I mean, you get the George Gammons of the world, you get a lot of these people. I'd love for you to touch on people, deflationary money can't work. Don't you know, Brandon? Don't you know, Doc? This can't, we tried free banking. We tried it in the 1800s and, we couldn't do it. Ohio had their own money, and Colorado and Michigan, they all had their own money, and it doesn't work. Does the instant settlement and digital money, doesn't that render this moot? I don't know what I'm missing here. Could you go into this and just, touch on deflation, but also this free banking that people just seem like, especially the gold bugs and libertarians or whatever it is, a lot of them just can't seem to get over that mental hurdle. I'd love for you to touch on that, because I've been thinking about this for a while and I don't understand why people can't make that connection.
Sure. So several interesting points to go off of here. So first of all, I don't think of Bitcoin. I've sort of changed the way I think about it, and Jeff Booth has helped a lot with this for me in listening to him talk about it. Bitcoin itself isn't deflationary money, and I've said that in the past, and so I need to redact everything I've said. Bitcoin is neutral money, right? It's an unchanging monetary supply. So right now the supply issuance is disinflationary, meaning it's decreasing over time. New Bitcoin comes on board, but overall there are 21 million. There only ever will be 21 million Bitcoin, right? Lots of them have been lost too. But so I think the best way to think about Bitcoin is it's neutral money. And when we're talking about deflationary prices, that's because, as Jeff Booth again eloquently points out often, and much better than I do, life should be deflationary. As humanity progresses, as technology progresses, we should see that being reflected in lower prices and a higher quality of life. Bitcoin simply reflects that. So as it goes up in value, what I like to turn it on its head. Everybody gets all focused on the number go up technology, NGU. I like to think of it as prices go down technology. I think that's a better way to think about it. I also think it's healthier, and it's less
Life is super technology. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love that, and it sort of separates it again. It creates more separation between proof of stake crypto, which is nonsense, speculative
Yeah.
garbage, and prices go down technology. So that's just a healthier way to think about it, because I believe, we're going to experience that for the rest of our lives as Bitcoiners living on a Bitcoin standard, and as more and more of the world adopts the Bitcoin standard. We're just going to see prices go down over time. And I think Sailors, right, he said, it's going up forever. What he means, if you turn that inversely, is prices will go down forever. I believe that. I don't think they're going to go down as rapidly as they are this decade. Certainly they will never go down as rapidly as they did last decade from like 2011 to 2020, at least by my calculations. The CAGR, the compounded annual growth rate of Bitcoin, was about 189%, 190%. I think that's slowing down this decade to around 50% ish. And I think it's going to continually slow down, and it'll eventually reach sort of a basal rate that will just sort of reflect the growth of humanity and the progress of technology being reflected. So that's what I would say about that first part. Shoot. What was it? We had a two-part
Oh,
question.
yeah, it was deflation number one. Like, I love how
Yep.
you and Jeff Booth say that it's neutral money that captures deflation. I love that.
Yes.
And then the other part was the free banking. You get a lot
Oh
of the
yeah.
gold bugs, whoever, right? And
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, you can't do it. We've tried it."
Lots of people, I don't know why, but a lot of Gen Xers who are prominent speakers
Yes.
talk about this, and I feel responsibility because I'm a Gen Xer. I'm right in the middle of Gen X, and so they're smart people. I listen to these people regularly. They have great macro takes. They understand the world, but they get stuck on certain issues with Bitcoin, and so
Mhm.
they still can't quite cross the Rubicon and
Yep.
come over yet. Just so interesting to me. So I think that what they're missing is Bitcoin. They love to compare, and they talk about private money and how all of these private monies by banks failed. I think that's like saying multiple intranets failed in the past, and they
Mhm.
should fail, and they will fail. And that's actually how I view, again, proof of stake cryptocurrencies. Those are intranets. Those are little, like, look at my marketing campaign, look at this cool thing I do, come over to my blockchain, and we're going to, change the world and make a bunch of money. It's just all nonsense, and they literally have just devolved into nonsense. They still are making 100x their gains. Who makes 100x their gains? It's the people that the influencers put out a ton of marketing for, and venture capital backs, and then these little tiny nonsense coins go up 100x or 1000x, and people think that they're being smart. That has nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin to me is like the internet, and all of these proof of stake cryptos are like the intranets. So when people talk about, well, all of these private currencies failed in the past, well, yeah, that's because who's going to use the Bank of Ohio's money? You can't use it anywhere unless you're, within a 20-mile radius of it. It's so limited. They were obviously destined to fail. It was sort of an interesting experiment. When people compare that to Bitcoin, they're just being, for lack of a better word, they're being stupid. They don't understand that Bitcoin is like the internet. It's everywhere. It already is ubiquitous. It's already accessible by everybody. It's literally decentralized and secure and designed to be the money for the world. So, the internet of money, as Jack Dorsey would say. And that's true. And so what those people just don't understand, that they're limited. They're thinking of it like a company intranet, and that's just a bad comparison. So they're going to learn that over time, right? It's the same kind of people who say, like, well, what if they just shut down the Bitcoin network? And I like to say, well, if actually shutting down Bitcoin is as easily as just shutting down the internet, which is to say you can't shut down the internet, right? And then people, well, what if there's a world war or something? Like, well, still the internet's going to survive in different parts of the world, and as long as one Bitcoin node survives somewhere, Bitcoin survives, right? And so all of those kind of arguments are just baseless and stupid, and they cast fear, uncertainty, doubt on people. That's fine. It keeps the price lower for now. It helps us to get in at cheaper prices. They're eventually going to learn. I went through all of these very things myself. I was very concerned that the government was going to shut Bitcoin down back in like 2019 and 2020. They possibly could have, but there's really no reason to. And again, for a government or even a coalition of governments to band together to try to stop it, it would be massively expensive, and in the end they would lose anyways. And so it's kind of ridiculous. So I guess I'll stop there. That's what I have to say about that.
with with that was perfect. Would it be almost similar to if you're playing Super Mario or you're playing Grand Theft Auto and you're using the currency in game and you're trying to use that, out in the real world in a sense, or like this intranet, like, yeah, it's great for like that community, that little thing you guys are using it for, but you can't go take this shitcoin, or you can't go take this other thing and go just start using it. No one's on your network. No one's using it except you, people playing this game with, in the console. It just makes me think of that. But like you said, it just, people haven't done the work yet. I guess it's all it is.
Exactly. One other good comparison I like for people, which I think is pretty accurate, is think of cryptocurrencies as like Starbucks points. Most people have the Starbucks app and they understand like having points. It does have value in that little network, but you can't take your Starbucks points and go buy other things with it. Like you have to, there are things that you can actually sort of exchange them for other things of value. And that's how the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem works. It's all these little value things, but they're totally dependent on the company. They're dependent on a centralized, less secure entity or corporate entity. They say they're not, securities, but I think again they are, even though the SEC has continued to fail in proving this point. They just clearly are. They're little software companies with their little blockchain code, and they're trying to promote it as much as possible so that the founders and the VCs can get rich and they can leave the people who buy into it as bag holders eventually. So it's just all nonsense. It's fine. And again, I just want to say one more thing. I don't actually even hate. There are Bitcoiners who hate these things. I don't hate them. People love to gamble. I was just at the airport and I watched some lady. She literally spent like 30 minutes opening pull tabs, and I'm like, people love to do that kind of stuff, man. They love to gamble. They love to speculate. They love to be involved in nonsense. They love to be entertained. And that's what proof of stake crypto represents. And so I'm like, fine, you guys go all do that. But that, just to be very, very clear, it has nothing to do with what's happening on the proof of work Bitcoin network. And Bitcoin is here to change the world. And it's a totally separate monetary and financial system, totally separate. So what I get most bugged by are people who meld those two things together and make people, especially newbies, believe that Ethereum and Bitcoin are kind of the same thing, and Dogecoin and Bitcoin are kind of the same thing, and they're just absolutely not. So I spend my days basically trying to teach people how different those things are.
So really quick, and we've talked about neutral money, captures deflation. You've also talked about in the past many times that it's, you believe it's very important to value your net worth. Look at your balance sheet, look at your financial statements in terms of Bitcoin. Could you just spend a minute kind of talking about, how someone does that, but also the importance of that?
Sure. So I think all of government fiat currency is just one massive rug pull. And it gets back to what we're talking about. It's literally designed to steal the purchasing power from individuals and corporations for the benefit of whoever controls it. And who controls fiat currency? It's the government, right? It's the central banks and it's the treasury through their issuance. So they get the benefit from it, and it's designed to, when I say it's a rug pull, it sort of pulls the wool over your eyes, meaning that you can think in nominal US dollar terms that you are getting wealthier every year because you look at your brokerage account statements, you look at the value of your house or whatever assets you may have, and you think, I'm getting wealthier because the percentage, it's a little green number and it has a plus sign in front of it, and I have gotten, say, whatever, I've made 10% on my stock market investments this year and another 8% on my house. Isn't that awesome? But what happens is, because of inflation, so price inflation, which is different than monetary debasement, but they're linked over the long term, you can actually be losing purchasing power over time, even though it looks like on paper your net worth is going higher. So Bitcoin, I believe, even though it's extremely volatile, over time it is the most accurate. It's the only honest unit of account. So it's the only it's the only accurate measuring stick, basically. So I've started doing this probably 3 years ago or so, and I really do recommend this for everybody. First of all, as a financial guy, an investment advisor and fund manager, I think everybody should be keeping track of their net worth. I think it's a good exercise. Like pull out an Excel spreadsheet and just go through everything you own, put that as your assets, and then put your debt on there. Those are your liabilities, and add you have the assets, you subtract the liabilities, and whatever that number is, that's your net worth. I like to do that on a monthly basis just to know where we're standing, because a lot of people think they have more money than they do, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I actually am in debt. I have a negative net worth, and most Americans actually do have a negative net worth, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, I think, actually gives you an accurate number. So what's interesting, like for case in point, for most people who do this, most people's net worth in US dollar terms has gone up, up, up since the end of 2022. So since the stock market has returned and since Bitcoin has increased in price and values have kind of, bottomed and started rising again, a lot of people see their value increasing significantly in dollar terms, but then interestingly, they're actually decreasing in Bitcoin terms. So if you have a bunch of fiat assets, and I'd look at anything basically outside of Bitcoin as a fiat asset, so your house, your stocks, your bonds, whatever, they may be going up in value, but they're actually losing in terms of Bitcoin. So their real valuation is actually going down. So I just think it's a healthy exercise for people to think about that. It helps people develop a Bitcoin standard much more quickly when you watch your Bitcoin, when you value your life and your net worth in Bitcoin terms. Highly recommended. I think all people should do that. At the very least, value it in dollar terms. But once you start to understand Bitcoin, you understand you want to use an accurate measuring stick, an accurate ruler. So if you want to actually accurately know what your net worth is, you should be doing it in terms of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's such a phenomenal idea. That's why just one of the things I wanted to touch on here with you that you said that you've been saying that for a while. With basically, long story short, it will eventually at some point, 10 years, 5 years, 20, 50, whatever it is, it'll basically just shrink down until you get basically to your allotment of Bitcoin that you own, correct? Or if someone has
Correct.
none, it'll go to zero if the dollar goes to zero, right? So
I've even said that, if I would quick tangent about MicroStrategy, right? So everybody emulates Saylor. I love Saylor. He's awesome. I don't think people should worship him. I think people, get a little too excited about, he's just another dude, right? He's smart and he's great for Bitcoin. But anyways, we don't have to go down that tangent.
yeah.
MicroStrategy, and I've said this, and I'm a MicroStrategy shareholder. So full disclosure, I own it in my hedge fund. I own it across my Vailshire accounts. I also own it personally. I think it's the best stock to own because of his Bitcoin stance and what they've been doing with their balance sheet. I've said, and this isn't even meant to be insulting to him, that the value of Bitcoin will basically cause the rest of the business valuation. So his software side of the business, which is all it was up until basically 2020, that will trend towards zero over time. And all he'll be left with is this MicroStrategy will basically be a Bitcoin holding company. I tweeted that out actually months ago, and then he came out about I think maybe 1 month or a few weeks ago saying that they've officially redesigned MicroStrategy and designated it as a Bitcoin holding company. Excuse me, a Bitcoin development company, which is basically a Bitcoin holding company. Which is to say, I think of it in terms of there are a lot of land holding companies out there. One popular one is called Texas Pacific Land. The ticker is TPL, which I've owned for a long time. It's basically just a company that has a ton of land in Texas and around the area, and they have this tiny little staff that basically sells off land as needed, or they'll lease out the land for oil and gas companies or for water rights, and they do all this kind of stuff. I think that MicroStrategy, because it holds so much Bitcoin, is basically just going to be doing the same thing. It's going to be basically Bitcoin management. Like, what do we do? It's not technically a productive asset, but it's a massively beneficial asset because it increases in purchasing power over time by design. So just owning it is productive and is a way to preserve and grow your purchasing power. So I just think that's what MicroStrategy is turning into. And again, I didn't mean that as an insult to him, but it's going to drive the value of their software business basically to zero over time because Bitcoin just grows so much faster in terms of a CAGR than his software business could ever grow.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with, everything being counterintuitive in a way. Like deflation for the average person or the normie is counterintuitive until you cross that Rubicon. Like we were saying, like a lot of the Gen Xers, the gold bugs, like it's very hard to see. And then it's like someone said this the other day, it was like, it seems absurd when you don't get it. And then once you do, it seems obvious, it's just like,
right.
And there's a lot of stuff like that in life, but man, does Bitcoin fit that threshold where it just makes no sense living in this fiat when you're on the fiat debt-based legacy monetary Titanic and you're just slowly going under the waves. And it's just like, well, the deck chairs aren't sliding and people are like, what do you mean? It's the dollar, it's America. Like this is amazing. This is the best. The dollar's never going down. And we're on the life raft and you can easily see the further you get away whoa, this thing's going down, guys. And you're yelling at each other on, each side. He's still yelling at each other. Like, you got to get off. They're like, no, you guys are morons. You guys are like going in this ocean. It's a little Bitcoin life raft. Like, don't you know? It's incredible. And to this point, like, I know you had, retweeted Dylan's thing. The biggest story in corporate finance is a little known software company that used to trade at a $1.5 billion market cap. His balance sheet has grown from 500 million to 13 billion liquid in 4 years by doing nothing other than adopting a superior currency. What's the whole point of that, though, is what you just explained. I think it's so important for the listener, someone just learning Bitcoin. It seems like, again, like the dollar value is going up, and it is obviously the fiat dollar value, but in terms of Bitcoin, the measuring stick, like, Foss always says, it's 11th grade math. To me, I'm like, it's a 7th grade science experiment. Like, it's the control. Like, again, you just explained it beautifully. It's you can't have more than one variable in an experiment, or else you don't know how to measure things. And to me, that is the control. Bitcoin is the control. Now you can start testing and doing things off of that. So I'd love for you to touch on any of that, but I do want to go into some Warren Buffett, like Groman and Preston the other day. We're just talking about this. So I'd love to get your thoughts on his cash, and he just continually keeps growing his balance sheet with cash over the last 15 years. And what's he doing? I guess is the question. What is happening? So
Right.
thoughts on any of that stuff.
So he's widely applauded for that strategy, and in the past that has worked very well. Like, that is a great fiat strategy, to build up your huge fiat pile and wait for the markets to collapse, and then be able to rush in like they did in 2008, 2009, and swoop in and buy all of these things at a massive discount, or get like very favorable terms on preferred stock and things like that. That's the Warren Buffett method. It's made him a billionaire, right? And I come from that school, right? I started Vailshire, my business, as a value investor in the Warren Buffett style. I used to listen to Preston Pysh all the time pre-Bitcoin, and I went along with him on my Bitcoin journey, and we kind of discovered it at the same time. And he's what helped me be okay with that as a value investor, getting into Bitcoin, which again back then was considered as this wildly speculative asset, right? So, anyways, mad respect for Preston. He's a friend of mine. He's a good dude. I called, first of all, I do have respect for Buffett, even though he's obviously very misinformed about Bitcoin, right? He calls it rat poison, and Charlie Munger, they both are just he was very against it. I get that, right? He's old, dude. The dude's, he's over 90 years old. Why would anyone care about what a 90-year-old thinks about a new technology, right? So of course he doesn't understand it. He got Apple like 20 years too late. He doesn't invest in technology. He always says, "I know nothing about technology. Basically, I like things I understand, like railroads and newspaper businesses and things like that." Bless his heart, right? He's been very successful. So he was the most successful fund manager of the last century, and that should not go unacknowledged. And even though he has a bad Bitcoin take, he's a master capital allocator. And so many months ago, that's what I was saying about Saylor before this became kind of widely known, that I said he's like the Warren Buffett of Bitcoin. Like, he understands capital allocation. A lot of people use the term speculative attack, but I think that's too aggressive, and I think that raises the hackles of U.S. politicians and financiers. I like the term, which I just coined recently, speculative arbitrage, and I think that's what he's doing. So Saylor sees the differences. He sees the importance of being able to get rid of a debasing asset with favorable terms, like say 0.625% interest rates on his latest round of debt that he just issued, and take that arbitrage opportunity and put that into very undervalued Bitcoin right now. And then over time, you see the benefits of that. So getting back to your question, Buffett has this massive pile of cash right now. All of the value investors are golf clapping and saying, wow, look at all that cash. I think that's massively foolish. And I think, and I might do this, by the way, I still own a little bit of Berkshire just so I can keep my foot in the door there. I think that shareholders should basically start demanding that, while fiat brains think that's a wise strategy, I would say that's a very foolish strategy to hold a melting ice cube, right? Like, they have that huge pile in cash. I know when they say cash, by the way, it's usually sitting in short-term treasuries. So they're probably earning 5% interest rates or so on that cash. Polite golf clap. Well, that's so smart. Good for him. He's ready. He's going to swoop in and buy stuff if the market crashes. In the meantime, though, he's losing the purchasing power of his shareholders. It's actually, not only is it not wise, I would say it's actually kind of dumb. I think that shareholders should put proposals out, and Buffett would be the perfect first target. They should say you need to put at least 10% of your cash pile into Bitcoin because you're just losing our purchasing power. Like, this is actually a bad investment, even though a lot of people are giving them the golf clap on CNBC and Bloomberg. So that's my take on it. There are a lot of companies like that that hold these massive amounts of cash or short-term T-bills. That's not very smart. So I would say that, and I hope Bitcoiners do rise up. Bitcoiners like me who still have one foot in traditional finance and the other foot in Bitcoin, we should start putting shareholder proposals out there for people to vote on, at the very least, because it raises awareness and it allows Bitcoiners to get to talk at the shareholder meetings and just be like, look, hey, we have this, whatever, 100 billion plus dollars in cash. Let's put 10% of it in Bitcoin and just see what it does. 10% is not going to make or break the company. If we're right, though, we could pull a sailor and have these massive returns. I think one by one, I think Berkshire will probably be the last to do that. Although Buffett's not going to live forever, right? I'm a doctor. I understand that human life has its limits. He's nearing the end, right? And I don't want him to die. I don't wish anything bad on him, but he's not going to live forever and probably not that much longer. And then the younger generation will take over. I think it'll be interesting to see how they respond, and I think it's possible the very people that got him, to invest like an Apple stock, that wasn't Buffett's decision; it was the younger guy's decision. They may not be as opposed to Bitcoin as he is. So we'll see what happens in the coming years.
Absolutely fascinating. I appreciate your take on that. What are some things, and to get in anything proprietary here, but what are some things that, like, again, a pre-coiner or any Bitcoiners can kind of look at? Like, what are some indicators that you're generally looking at when Dr. Jeff opens up his dashboard every day? What are some of the things? Is it M2? Is it the real inflation? What are you looking at every day? Just a couple of your things that the average person kind of give a gauge of what's going on in the world.
Sure. So I base most of my macro indicators. In fact, I base my moniker. So right now I'm Dr. Bullcrab, as you mentioned. I think there are 5 distinct phases. So I'll go through these real quick. It starts at bearish. So markets are cyclical and they constantly are ebbing and flowing. They start as bear markets, so I was affectionately or disaffectionately called Dr. Bear back in 2022, and then it goes from bear to crabbish. So bear crab. There's bear crab, bull crab, and bull. So we're not quite to bullish phase. And why do I say that? For me, it's really based on what is the global M2 monetary supply doing, what is U.S. net liquidity doing. I'll just real briefly touch on those because that's where I start every day. That's the first thing I look at. So U.S. net liquidity. U.S. net liquidity is basically what is the central banks doing? What do they have on their balance sheet? The amount of assets, is that increasing or decreasing? And then you subtract what's going on in the overnight reverse repo market, and you subtract the Treasury general account from that. And when you get those 3 numbers together, you're left with something called U.S. net liquidity. U.S. net liquidity has been range bound, chopping sideways like a crab. That's why I keep saying crab. Chopping sideways for 2 years. It's literally at the 2-year mark right now. And it's at the top end of that range. That's why I lean towards bullish in my crab zone, but still crabbish. It's still chopping sideways. It still hasn't broken out of that range. Why does that matter? US based assets are strongly correlated with what US net liquidity is doing. And so when I say US-based assets, mainly US stocks. So US small cap stocks, mid cap stocks, and micro cap stocks generally follow. And I get a kick out of so many people who don't get this or don't even believe it. I'm like, look at the charts. Like, it's almost impossible to deny. You can literally watch these things go, and within like a week or two, small cap stocks tend to follow exactly what US net liquidity is doing. So that would be my number one giveaway secret: follow US net liquidity. The other secret is follow global M2. Why? Because global M2 money supply is closely correlated with what global assets do. The most prominent being Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is it's distributed as the internet. It's basically everywhere already, even though it's not a great medium of exchange yet. It's a fantastic store of value. Bitcoin tends to rise and fall based on what global M2 is doing. Global M2, it has many factors, and there are lots of nuances for how to calculate this. I always tell people, if you want to have the very best work on that, go follow a guy named Michael Howell from Cross Border Capital on Twitter. He puts out the best work on that, and I have sort of the poor man's version that I follow of that. just to be clear. But as global M2 tends to rise, that tends to mean that what's happening is the global economy is doing well and banks are lending and they're expanding the global monetary supply. In contradistinction, when that is falling and banks are starting to clamp down and they're not making loans and loans are getting destroyed and people are going bankrupt and all that kind of stuff, global M2 decreases. That tends to mean global assets tend to follow that same course, like Bitcoin, like gold, and then like, which most people don't think about, but US technology stocks, the mega cap tech stocks, the Amazon, Apples, the FANGs, as people think of them, or Magma, or however you want to think about it, Microsoft, those stocks, they are global assets. And so lots of people around the world invest in these companies, and that's sort of a surrogate global asset as well. They rise and fall with global M2. So what is global M2 doing? It's been in a 3-year band of chopping sideways, interestingly, and it is also at the very top of it right now. It keeps trying to poke through and start a new uptrend. When it does, and the people always ask me, when are you going to turn bullish? Are you Dr. Bull? I literally get that question 10 times every single day.
Yeah.
And I say the same answer every single time. It's when that breaks higher, when global M2 starts to finally trend higher again, that will mean that the global economy has found its footing again, and banks are starting to lend again. Global M2 is expanding. I will turn into Dr. Bull at that point. We're not there yet. I know the Bitcoin price is rising. That's fantastic. I still think it's actually within normal limits of its range, and we can talk about that if you want. But until that breaks free, I just have kind of tempered expectations. This has been a great run for Bitcoin. I'm really happy for all of us who have been in Bitcoin for years and are finally seeing some redemption and validity. But we haven't even started the bull market yet. This is still the pre-game warm-up. This is normal price action. I still think a couple things, and I'll just segue into this regarding Bitcoin because
Yeah.
I'm nearing the end of my time too. Usually what happens is, and it's not always, and we've only have a couple cycles to look at, but we tend to have a lot of hype building up into the halving. And then there's usually a letdown after that. So I would not be surprised, whatever the price of Bitcoin is at halving. I have my price range target, which is unchanged, 62,500 at the low end up to 75,000. It's still sitting in that range. I hope I'm wrong. There's a lot of people are saying we're going to hit 100. I hope they're right. I don't think they're going to be, but that's just, based on the models I look at. After the halving, don't be surprised if we get a letdown. That's very typical for that to happen. And so a lot of people think they're going to be saying it's going to the moon. You're stupid, if you don't think so. Mortgage your house today and get a HELOC and put all your money in Bitcoin. I think they're going to be disappointed. I think it's possible that we see a significant drop of Bitcoin into the 40 or 50,000s after halving in the summer. I keep telling people, and this is sort of a joke, but just so people have something to work with because they always want predictions. I think the bull market starts in earnest on Michael Jackson's birthday, and I'll let people Google that to find out when that is. It's late summer. And then things get exciting. I think then we're going to see global M2 backing. Then I will start telling people I'm Dr. Bull again. Then we're going to have global M2 backing and supporting and acting as a tailwind to the price of Bitcoin. Then things get exciting. So as we head into the fourth quarter of this year and into 2025, I think we're definitely going to be above 6 digits. I could be wrong, just a guess, not individual investment advice. But I think it's going to be well above 100,000, and I think we're going to go much higher as 2025 drags on. So I'm very much looking forward to what's coming, even though it's been fun so far. The game hasn't even started yet, so kind of buckle up for what's next.
That's beautiful. I know we have a few minutes left here. I got like 2 more quick things. Next time I'm going to send you, because I have a few things we're not going to get to today, but we'll save them for next time, maybe the next few months. I'm going to send you a pack of the Bitcoin trading cards and have you rip it live on here and see if you pull like a 21 club or something like that. And then we can sell it for sats. You can trade it in, sell it for sats. Because they're getting really collectible and people are just going nuts over them. So we have to do that next time. And then my question is, what is your card? Because I know we talked about this months ago. At some point, we've got you on your list. You're going to be in the cards. Is it going to be like, what are you going to look like? Is it going to be a bull, crab, just a bull? Like, what is it?
That's the problem.
Riding a bull. I don't know.
That's the problem, is that I change with the conditions, right? And so I'm really pragmatic. I'm not dogmatic. Even I'm dogmatic about Bitcoin being better money for a better world and that it's going to go up forever. But it goes in cycles, right? I was very unpopular in 2020. I had lots of people cancel me. I had threats. people hated me when I was like, I think the price is going to go lower. Not only a little lower, I think it's going to go a lot lower, you guys. I still remember this is back in 2022 in like April, and the price was in the 40,000s. And I was on Toxic Happy Hour telling people, I think it could fall in half, you guys. Like, based on what I'm looking at, we may see 20,000 Bitcoin. And blah, blah, blah. People were so angry with me, like calling me like, you can't be a Bitcoiner. Like, how dare you say this? I'm like, I'm just telling you what I see, right? And that's how I am. So I'm never like 100% bullish or crabbish or bearish, whatever. So I don't know. Somebody's going to have to get creative. Maybe that'll be part of a card design, is that you incorporate all of those symbols, and I'm somewhere in the
Ooh,
middle of that or something. That's
ooh, I
way
like
beyond
that.
my skills. I don't know, but I would
Yeah,
have a
oh yeah,
yeah, I would have a
me
hard
too.
time being like, being labeled as just one of these things forever. I certainly don't want
I
to be
like that.
labeled as Dr. Bear forever, even though people still call me that. So,
Right, right. I know the moniker stuck for a while. We'll talk to Aladdin and the artist and the team about that. I love that actually, like some type of like spherical, like just like you said, the different things and stations you kind of move to over time. All right, two really quick things. I'm
yep.
gonna do a quick word association. New segment sponsored by Bitcoin Trading Cards. It's a little play off of the Sunday conversation with Caleb Presley, actually.
Nice.
And then if anyone's seen that from Barstool Sports, but one quick little health thing really fast before we do that to finish up for a minute. What's something you see as a doc when you're treating human beings? What's like one thing that you just see, like this pattern that kind of has been coming up for maybe 10 or 20 years now, that you're seeing that's affecting human beings, that you can hey, this is my health advice for the day, guys, like this, I see this all the time. What is it?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a big question. Well, for me, the most obvious is just nutrition, right? We have this fiat diet that people have been on, and it became popular when I was a kid in the 80s to have artificial foods and eat the food of astronauts and drink Tang, and instead of butter have margarine, and all these, and instead of eggs have egg whites because they're the healthy substitute. All these kind of things, all this artificial processed food was not only accepted, but it was actually considered healthier. And so I've watched the effects of that throughout time. And there's not, correlation is not causation, right? You got to be super careful with all this kind of stuff. But I think it's pretty clear by now that all of this processed food has had a serious negative effect on human health. And watching Americans get more and more and more obese over the decades has been crazy, right? And as a guy, I used to do something called interventional radiology, and the outcomes of surgeries and medical procedures are affected greatly by the health of the patient. And the more obese the patient, the higher the risks of surgical complications, comorbidities we call them, and just morbidity and mortality in general, so that you're going to die sooner, you're going to have a lot more complications, diabetes, hypertension, risks of heart attack, risks of stroke, higher risks of cancer, all of those things. I've watched those progress steadily over the last decades, and I'm personally encouraged to see this huge movement going on in popular culture, where the pendulum is finally starting to swing back in the other direction, where people, like, as a doctor, even, you get canceled if you say that being overweight is unhealthy, obesity is unhealthy. You get canceled. You have culture telling you're a fat shamer, you're a terrible person. I'm like, I'm a doctor. I'm telling you, this is a factual, evidence-based comment. It is unhealthy to be overweight and be obese, and it starts with your diet, right? So coming full circle to your question, nutrition, right? And so getting back to the basics, right? Red meat is not unhealthy. Eggs are not unhealthy. Even the cholesterol levels that dog, you got to be super careful with all this kind of stuff. But I'm not giving medical advice here either. But in general, what's interesting is the studies that show what like ideal cholesterol levels are. Even though doctors shoot for the lowest possible cholesterol levels, and everybody's on a statin, right, like a Lipitor
Mm-hmm.
or something like that,
Yeah.
that the lowest rates of morbidity and mortality are actually at higher cholesterol rates than what everybody shoots for, which is super interesting. And these huge studies show that it's that you actually want to have a bit higher. And I don't want to get in, I just have to be so careful with what I'm saying. I'm not telling people they're getting bad medical advice. Do your own
Do your own
research
research.
though. Do your own
Yeah.
research, please, and consider that maybe science is meant to be a very humble endeavor. Most people think of science as this is the fact, this is what we know, and science is always evolving. There are theories that change as the evidence changes. This is why I was so disturbed by the whole COVID movement and all of the doctors that would get on TV. They were claiming to have the truth when that wasn't the truth, and they were claiming you have to do this, and this to be safe and to be, to protect others from you, when it was just, they were just guessing, and they were just making decisions based on their fear and based on political clout and other things. So anyways, I'm diving way too
Yep.
deep, and we're going to get
Nope.
canceled just for these things. So.
Yeah, I know. We'll get canceled. Last minute. I know you. Now we got to get going here. I want to do a quick lightning round word
Sure.
association before we leave. New segment presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Word association. Paul Krugman.
Fax machine.
U.S. healthcare.
Hurting. In need of a hard reboot.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Founder of Bitcoin. The man.
Jay Powell.
Doing an okay job for the unnecessary job title that he holds. That's a whole nother discussion.
Oh man, next time. CPI.
Annoyingly high for longer than most people expect.
Vitalik Buterin.
Should have built, Ethereum should be Bitcoin layer 2, not its own separate base layer.
Jim Cramer.
Great contrarian indicator.
Debt spiral.
Not as worrisome as most people like to think. I don't talk in terms of hyperbole. Most people do. It's not as, it's going to go on for much longer than people assume.
Proof of work.
That's a good one. It's the paradigm shift. It all depends on proof of work, and if it's not proof of work, it's not real.
Peter Schiff.
The gold salesman.
Integrity.
Super important.
Bitcoin Trading Cards.
A great idea.
And Vailshire.
We're the segue between no coiners and the Bitcoin standard.
Love it. Doc, thank you so much for coming on today. You passed the test here at the end, the word association. So getting people a little uncomfortable. Absolutely love it. Where can people find you?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter or X all the time. My handle is at Vailshire Cap. Don't forget the little I. It's VAILSHIRE Cap. And then I'm a fund manager and I run RIAs. I'm not really looking for new clients, but if you're super interested, you can reach out to me at info@vailshire.com.
Glad to have you on our team. That's for sure, Doc. Appreciate the time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. I love being on your show.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows, of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.